So, of course, you know that there's been a second hurricane and people are still dealing with the fallout from the first one. You've got some cards there talking about how much money we've sent to Ukraine, and FEMA claims it's broke. It doesn't have any money. But this kind of contradicts that. Like, we've had all this money, and instead of spending it on people who need it here in this country, we've been shipping it overseas.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, what it's all about is politics and money.
Yeah.
And the money's going to a place where they know it's going to come back to them.
Right.
So that's really what it's all about. But there's a website that people can go to. It's very interesting. It's called U.S. Aid from the American People. It's called the Energy Security Project.
Okay.
And you can look that up. It's very simple. It's about Ukraine, helping Ukraine. It's been 2 years and counting since the start of the Russia war.
Yeah.
Full on. And the United States government continues to provide all kinds of help, electricity, and all the things for electricity, water, and all the things for water. Our government is providing money to pay Ukraine so they could pay their government officials.
Got it.
How do you like that? I don't get it. None of that makes sense to me. In February of this year, 2024, the U.S. government reaffirmed its commitment to bolster Ukraine in the face of Russia's attacks. So here's what we did. Starting with security, the U.S. has provided 1,093 generators to help Ukrainian energy companies deliver power to people. Now that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for that. I mean, hey, people in need, right?
Right.
Where's the money for our people?
Yeah. Where are the generators getting sent down south?
Yeah, they haven't sent anything. Not only haven't they sent anything, they're saying that they're out of money and they don't have now. Of course, we know the government's not out of money, but the reason why they're saying it's out of money is because they want to get more money.
Yeah, funding.
They want to increase funding. Insulated pipe, 140 miles of insulated pipe. Steel, pre-insulated pipes, plus 12,500 related materials like couplers and all those other things that are needed for the pipe. 3,297 first aid kits.
Wow.
Okay. Mobile power stations, one 28 megawatt gas turbine power plant. Auto transformers. We're sending 11 auto transformers to help Ukraine Energy. A 2,500 kilowatt mobile generator. 124 mobile boiler houses, emergency heating shelters, 243. I mean, this goes on for pages.
Yeah.
We're talking salt. How about this one? 7,000 tons of industrial salt to help support Ukrainians' energy generation needs.
Wow.
I don't know what they use the salt for, but in any case, that's worse. 125 pumps. In order to help pump whatever. I don't even know what they're pumping. What are they pumping? But we could sure use pumps in North Carolina over there because they can pump water out. They're just inundated. 85 excavators. These are huge machines that we sent over there at our cost, taxpayer. 30 drones and 30 iPads. Maybe that was just because Zelensky needed a couple to give out to his family. Hey, son, you want, whatever. 6,000 tons of methanol that to help the Ukrainian oil and gas companies continue producing gas safely. 547 circuit breakers, and these are not the little ones like you have in your house. These are extremely large and they're very expensive. 10 bucket trucks. 10 bucket trucks we sent over to Ukraine. 50 emergency vehicles, and we don't know what they are. They just said emergency vehicles.
Okay.
So, 28 sets of IT equipment, which gives them full ability to be able to run internet technology for not just one company, but we're talking this is enough to blanket the entire country of Ukraine.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we're sending all this information over there, all these products, and the help that goes along with it. We forgot about that because they are sending technical teams over to help with our equipment to make sure that they're running it and operating it properly so that they get the best use out of it. Because after all, it's all for the Ukraine people.
Right. Yeah, this is crazy, especially since we're giving families. It's not just per person, it's per family.
Yeah.
$750.
$750. That's a slap in the face.
And these people can't even get the money. One, they're being turned down like crazy. They're applying for the money, and unless you're like a super low-income family, you can't get the money. And so the Harris and Biden administration's like, no, we're not giving you the money. And also, these people don't have computer access.
No.
How are they supposed to apply for the money in the first place?
They can't. And the government knows that. And that's why when you look at situations like what's going on in Florida, okay, they just got hit by one hurricane. Now they got another one that just went through there. It did a lot of devastation. We don't even know to what degree yet. Thankfully, it wasn't as large as they said,
it could be, yeah.
And it didn't cause maybe hopefully as much damage or death, thankfully. But here's the thing, look at Ron DeSantis and the way he set that thing up.
Yeah.
Amazing. They had stuff pre-positioned, he was in place, and we're talking about an administration that has all of his ducks lined up, man. Everybody knew what they needed to do. They knew where they needed generation, knew where they needed power, knew where they needed pumpers, knew where they needed electrical linemen.
Yeah.
And it's all laid out.
Yeah, I mean, look at Tennessee, for instance. They got hit pretty hard. I would say maybe not as hard as North Carolina, but pretty similar. We're not hearing stories out of Tennessee that things are really bad. Why? Because they have a government that took care of the problem and prepared for it in advance.
Yes.
And that's a big issue for
Huge
Democrat states like that are dealing with the effects of the hurricane.
Yeah. Well, we find this all across the board. Anytime that there's a devastation, anytime that there's a problem, Democrats are calling on the federal government to be able to help, when all the while they should have done all that they can do first beforehand.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we've got a story here. This is about Tim Walz. He called on Tuesday for the Electoral College to be abolished.
Oh.
I'm just going to read his quote here.
That's no surprise because we don't want elections. After all, why do we need elections?
Right? This is what he said. He says, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. We need a national popular vote. So we need to win Beaver County, Pennsylvania. We need to be able to go into York, Pennsylvania and win. We need to be able to go into Western Wisconsin and win. We need to go into Reno, Nevada and win. A couple hours later, the Harris campaign said in a statement, Governor Walz believes that every vote matters in the Electoral College, and he is honored to be traveling the country and battleground states working to earn support from for the Harris-Walz ticket.
They contradict each other. They
had to backpedal because what he said was so ridiculous.
Well, it's believe it or not, if they do ever get full control of the government, we could see that easily happen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there'll never be a Republican in office ever again. Why? Because they control all the major cities. Right now, we're still flying people into cities, into states, and then busing them into cities to make sure that they have total control and redistricting and be able to determine how many representatives for each district.
Right. I think we should start and just explain what the Electoral College is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know.
No.
So basically when you vote, you're voting for a slate of electors. You're not actually voting directly for the president or vice president. And in fact, we didn't always vote for senators directly either. That's new with the passage of the, I think, the 17th Amendment. Anyhow, when you vote for a slate of electors, what happens is 41 days after the election, the electors go to their state capitals and they cast their votes for the president first on one ballot and then the vice president on another ballot. And then those are tallied up and sent to the Congress where the vice president counts those ballots and then names the next president and vice president of the United States. And so with that being said, I thought I'd present three defenses of why we need the Electoral College. First, if we didn't have the Electoral College, candidates would only focus on big cities like LA, New York City, and Chicago.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because they would go in, they would campaign in those cities, and they would get major votes from those cities. They wouldn't care about the Midwest. They wouldn't go to places like Pennsylvania, like Tim Walz was saying.
Yeah.
They're not going to campaign there because they don't need those votes. They would vote in big, populous cities, and people in the middle of the country wouldn't get their votes heard anymore, basically.
Basically that.
That's number one. Number two, actually getting rid of the Electoral College would lead to civil war. And the reason I say that is because in at least some part or to large part, the South seceded from the Union because they believed, and it was true, they didn't have any sway on who would become president.
True.
And so if we were to get rid of the Electoral College now, we'd have the same situation where huge major cities are deciding who's president, and campaigns wouldn't go to these smaller places and campaign.
No, it'd be East Coast, West Coast.
And that's it.
And parts of North and South, really the tips of Miami.
Right, exactly. They wouldn't have any need to go anywhere else.
No.
And number three, if we got rid of the Electoral College, it would be easier to cheat. And the reason for that is right now we have swing states. And before an election, it's pretty hard to predict where those swing states are. So if you want to set up ballot harvesting and actually want to print ballots and cheat, which does happen despite what the mainstream media says, which they admit sometimes, if you want to figure out a way to cheat, you have to bill it up in advance before an election. And the problem with the electoral college system is it's very hard to predict where those states are, where they're going to be swing states.
Yeah, where the battle is going to be actually. So
Exactly.
they can't pre-print the ballots in advance.
Right.
Because they don't know where they're going to be.
Exactly. And it would be hard to set up centers where they could do that in the right states and work all the logistics of it out. So I thought those were some pretty convincing arguments as to why we need to have the electoral college.
Well, our forefathers were pretty smart, and those that are going
Yeah.
after them, who made some of the changes and the amendments to our Constitution, were as smart. And I think that's all God divine. I think God's purpose and plan is behind it all, because the United States has been the beacon, if you will, the place of refuge in the world. There is no other place. Reagan said it well. If America's not around, where will people go?
Right.
There is no other refuge.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say with one thing, though, the 17th Amendment, I believe it is, where it made it so that we directly vote for our senators, was that was a big issue, and it still is, in getting rid of the rights of states. And the reason I say that is because back before this amendment was passed, the state legislatures would actually choose who the senators were. So you had direct elections for the House, which kind of mirrored what happened during the time when the Constitution was set up with Britain, where you had the House of Lords and the House of Commons.
Yes.
The House of Lords was like the Senate in our country, where they were appointed, and what they would do was they would represent more of the state's interests, where the House would represent the people's interests, and the presidency would represent everything as a whole, the whole union. And the founders were correct in saying that we need to have different ways we set up this government rather than a direct democracy, because that leads to tyranny of the majority, as
Absolutely.
Alexis de Tocqueville said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was one of those things that are positive.
Yeah.
But again, now we're having an influx of immigrants being pushed into different states. We need to be careful.
Yeah, for sure. All right, another story here. This is about meat processing plants expected to shut down because of new EPA rules. I'm just going to read a few things from this report by the Epoch Times. It says, the proposed rules would establish tighter limitations for nitrogen released into the environment by large processors and would also limit phosphorus for the first time. The rules would apply to processors directly discharging wastewater into bodies of water, and for the first time, would also apply to those indirectly discharging wastewater via water treatment plants. In other words, the rules would establish pre-treatment standards for oil and grease, total suspended solids, and biochemical oxygen demands. About 850 of these 5,000 facilities would be affected by the preferred rule changes. So why do you think that this is an issue that people should be caring about right now?
Well, the thing is that this is an expansion of federal power. And in that expansion, it's actually going to affect 3,878 facilities, giving sweeping authority that can literally crush the meat market. Now, we know that the left wants to crush the meat market because they believe that cow farts are affecting the air.
Right.
They believe that meat is not healthy for you to be eating. We're watching meat prices go through the roof already due to regulation.
Yeah.
U.S. Poultry and Egg Association states that the industry will incur $1.1 billion per year in compliance costs, which would trigger the loss of 10,000 jobs, tens of thousands of jobs, and increase the price of meat once again. Now, there's 27 states attorneys general that are against what the government is trying to do right now. And you can see it's almost a split. Everything is split in this nation, along party lines, unfortunately, because this is nothing more than bowing down to the whole green agenda.
Yeah.
That's all this is. And, it's going to affect people like me. I'm upset because I love my meat.
Right.
Now I'm not the kind of guy that's a cattle raiser. Okay. I'm not going to be a farmer. I'm not going to go out and buy some cows and, get up at 4 a.m. and feed them. That just isn't going to happen. So I got to be able to go somewhere to buy the meat.
Right.
But, I like, ribeyes, $24 a pound. That's ridiculous. And this is only the beginning.
Right.
That's why we got to take back America.
Yeah, they're estimating between 127,000 and 317,000 jobs could be lost because of these new regulations.
Huge. And of course, if Kamala's in office and they allow this stuff to go through, she'll just blame Trump for the loss of those jobs.
Exactly.
Somehow. That's what they do. They turn it around and blame it on the Republicans all the time. But really, this is all about control. The government looking to take more and more control over every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And that's just another. Can't even eat now.
Right.
The things that we want to eat because it's going to be so costly we won't be able to afford it.
Right. And to the people who say, well, they're doing this so that we can get rid of harmful stuff in our foods and prevent us from getting sick because of the meat we're eating, I would simply say, this is actually going to affect the smaller corporations, the smaller family businesses that actually produce their meat correctly, instead of the larger ones who can actually afford to implement these changes.
Yeah,
the smaller ones are going to go out of business, and that's where the good meat comes from in the first place.
That's where it comes from. So it's the smaller mom and pops, that's where they're like small business. But, everything in government is kind of like dominoes. What I mean is one thing affects another.
Right.
The left is trying to push for, mandatory health care for everybody, which is kind of like universal Medicare, if you will, for everybody. And it sounds good at the beginning. But now, if you think about it, the government being in total control over your health, now they say, well, we're finding out that there's a lot of people who are having, trouble with cholesterol, for instance. So we need to stop meat and stop meat production because, after all, we're paying for your health care.
Right.
Do you understand?
They have an interest in it now.
They have an interest in it now. So we have to be careful because this affects every aspect of our life.
So speaking of rising prices, new numbers out about core inflation and inflation in general. So the annual inflation rate slowed to 2.4% last month, down from 2.5%.
Thank you, Biden.
Yeah, right.
Bidenomics works.
The CPI, core consumer price index, jumped at a higher than expected pace of 0.2% monthly. And basically what all that means is food prices surged 0.4% from August to September. Meats, poultry, fish, and eggs all climbed by 0.8% together, like the food index. Eggs actually themselves skyrocketed by 8 whole percentage points.
Crazy.
And vegetables are up by 0.9 points. So everything's getting more expensive, and we all know why that's happening, but something that would exacerbate that would be new EPA regulations.
Absolutely. Anytime the government touches anything, it ruins it. It makes it more costly.
Right.
Makes it more difficult for people to actually get into that business, and it affects the way of life for Americans.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you this: what do you think about the election the way it's heading now? I've got some numbers here. This is the RCP average, real clear polling. Trump is up in Arizona. He's up in Nevada, he's up in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. So he's up in 5 of the 7 swing states. Harris leads in Wisconsin by 1 point and in Michigan by 0.4 points. So with that being said, what's your general feel of the election as it stands right now?
My gut is that he's going to sweep the nation. Okay. That's my gut. The problem is, sometimes my gut is affected by what I want.
Exactly.
And as much as I do want that, I also realize there's a lot of really very sick, ill-informed, uninformed, ignorant voters out there who we just never know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the others, which, may try to find a way to cheat or whatever. But my worst sense about the election is not the election itself, but it's subsequent to the election. Okay. What is going to happen Friday morning or Wednesday morning? I'm sorry. Yeah. Election's on Tuesday. What's going to happen on Wednesday morning? If Trump wins, will there be an uprising? I mean, to the point of maybe even senators and congressmen calling for Trump to be disqualified, somehow using some obscure rule or some obscure idea. Or what will happen across the nation in the way of riots, George Soros and his group and many others, Kamala Harris, who will make sure that people get out of jail and don't, have fake bail. What's going to happen? If Kamala Harris wins, what will be our response? I wonder, because I don't see how she could win. I really don't see that. In the natural, I can't see it. What will be our response? What will be the response of many people like me on the right who may be just completely fed up and say, if Trump loses, it's because they stole the election. And could you blame them for believing that? No, I couldn't. So I if anything, my gut has that sense of I'm ill at ease.
Yeah.
About the whole situation.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not sure what the response of conservatives would be if Harris is to win. I don't know what it looks like. Conservatives don't seem like a violent people to me.
No.
They don't seem like they get aggravated easily.
And in general, we're not.
We kind of restrain ourselves more and we're more civil. However, I don't know what it looks like in a situation where Harris wins.
Yeah.
Because as Elon Musk has been saying and others, if she wins, there are no more elections. They might pretend there are elections.
Oh, yeah. No, there'll be elections.
But
there won't be elections.
They'll import so many illegal aliens that at that point it won't matter. They'll make D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, which will take over the government entirely. Who knows? Maybe they'll get rid of they'll probably get rid of the filibuster and the electoral college too.
Yeah. And all I have to do is say, well, we're giving amnesty to everybody that came in the country, giving them the right to vote, giving them this, giving them that. They'll all vote Democrat and sayonara to free and fair elections.
And on that happy note again this week, let's get to Ask the Pastor.
We have to use Scripture against the enemy in order to get him to flee. You got to stick with the Word, though. You can't hit him with anything else. It's got to be the Word of God.
So, Pastor Mike, in light of what has happened with Hurricane Helene and now Hurricane Milton, how can God allow evil or bad things like this without becoming himself sinful or evil?
Well, that's an interesting question. Can't say it's the first time I've ever heard it. And I think a lot of people think that way sometimes, how can God allow evil? But let's face it, God spun the world into existence, if you will.
Yeah.
And basically is seated at the right hand of the Father. Jesus is seated. He's all done. He's finished his work. But if I can get to a couple of scriptures here, if I may, let's go to Proverbs first. And we're going to read a little scripture. So if we go to Proverbs, let's see, I made some notes, I think, on some of this stuff, but did I make any notes on this? I don't know. Thought I did. We go to Proverbs 16:4 anyhow. Let's just do that. And it says this, interestingly enough, how much better is it to get wisdom than gold? No, that's the wrong verse. It's Proverbs 16, verse 4. It says, the Lord has made all things himself, for himself. Yea, even the wicked for the day of evil. Wow. That's pretty interesting. So God even made evil people for the day of evil. So when you say, how could God allow this to happen? Well, God created Lucifer, Satan, knowing that Lucifer was going to, rebel.
Yeah.
He did. He creates havoc everywhere he goes. But it's all for God's purposes, as it says here, for the day of evil. In other words, God has a plan that goes beyond what we can think, beyond what we can hope, beyond what we can even imagine. So for us, I mean, the easiest analogy I could think of is, we're like a parent to a child. We warn a child of things that are dangerous so that they don't get hurt. And many times the child takes it as if, well, you're trying to stop me from doing something, And so we look at evil kind of like a child. We go, well, that's ridiculous. God wants to just eliminate evil. Well, without evil, we don't realize just how good God is. We really don't. You turn to Romans chapter 1, and this is, again, an interesting verse. Romans chapter 1, we'll go to verse 18. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath shown it unto them. So the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness. God is allowing evil on the earth in order to reveal to all of mankind just how evil is, if you will. It's a simple concept.
Yeah.
So when we see something bad happen, what do we say? What's the first thing usually a person says, even if they don't even know God? Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. Well, what God? Who are you talking about? Oh God, no, oh God. You hear people saying, oh God, at the wrong and craziest, ridiculous times when they claim they don't even believe in God.
Right.
So what are they calling on? Well, God revealed himself through nature. He said the sun, the moon, and the stars are all there. And so man has no excuse to claim that there is no God.
Right.
And there is, and he's real. So God allows evil to exist for his purposes, which are, number one, to expose evil and what it is, and number two, to be able to call people unto himself. When people really get a revelation of the difference between good and evil, that there really is evil, and that evil people will never turn good. They just won't. It's not going to happen. That's why God wishes that all men should be saved, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Many people are going to, it says, in that day, many will say, Lord, Lord, did we not call on your name? And did we not do this and that in your name? There's going to be people, unfortunately, who will not make it into heaven. And those are people who God loves, God desired and died for them that they would go to heaven, but it's their decision.
Right.
It isn't God's decision. God never created anybody so that they would go to hell. He created everybody so that they would be in eternity with him. He never created the earth so that it would have all this terrible things that happen, mainly because of man or man's ideas or man's, work upon the earth. But a lot of it is also just the nature of where we are. The nature of the earth is that there will be hot, cold, summer and winter, day and night will not cease upon the earth. It says in Genesis. This is going to happen. And in that course of events, summer, winter, day and night, heat and cold, there's going to be hurricanes, there's going to be bad weather, there's going to be good weather. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. There's going to be good things that happen. There's going to be bad things that happen. But all of it is so that we will eventually get to the point where we cry out to God. And we say, God, if you're real, show yourself. And he always will. He will show himself to you if you have a clean and pure heart and really desire to see him. Not like, I don't believe in you, but if you show yourself, I'll believe in you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be something pure.
Right.
So that question troubles me because usually when people ask it, they're coming from a position of not believing in God, not wanting to believe in God. And so no matter what answer you give them, they go, yeah, but God still allowed it to happen. So he must be evil, evil himself.
Yeah.
But yet, because we don't understand fully, just like a child can't understand his parents, God's design is that we would turn back to him.
Yeah.
And we would say, Lord, show me, help me, forgive me. And his hand is not short.
Right.
He always reaches out.
Yeah.
Just like Peter. He walked on the water, man. Baby, think about it. Peter walked on the water.
Yeah.
I wish I could walk on water. It'd be kind of cool.
Me too.
But then he got his eyes off Jesus. And his son cried out to the Lord. And the Lord lifted him out of the water. And guess what? They walked back on the water to the boat. Interesting.
Yeah.
So we cry out to God. He'll lift us up out of the miry clay. And together, we'll walk back to safety. That's the God we serve.
Amen. That was good. Thank you for the answer.